Hello and welcome to this Info Security Magazine webinar. I'm Michael Hill, the acting editor, and I'll be moderating this webinar in association with Darktrace. So for the next hour, we're going to be looking at automating your security response, the next step in data protection. So just before I introduce our panel of speakers, I will just run through a few quick housekeeping points my end. There's going to be 3 poll questions in today's webinar. I'll read those out for you and I'll announce when they're live, so please do vote on those questions. Also, any questions that you might have for any of our speakers, please do use the questions option to submit them, and we'll do our best to answer your questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, for those of you on Twitter, our hashtag is InfoSecWebinar, so please feel free to join the discussion on social media as well. Just a quick note about CPE credits. This webinar does qualify listeners to 1 credit based on an attendance time of 50 minutes. That's 50 minutes. Once you've done that, you will be able to download a certificate which you can submit to your governing body, and there are further instructions on our website for doing that. Please do note that it can take 48 hours for those certificates to be made available for download. Okay, so to introduce our panel of speakers for this webinar, there's obviously myself, Michael Hill. We're joined by Matt Hardy, who is Interim CISO at 3 Ireland. We're also joined by Rahim Jina, who's CIO and co-founder of EdgeScan. And finally, Max Heinemeyer, who's Director of Threat Hunting at Darktrace. So a fantastic panel joining us for this session. So just before I hand over to our first speaker, I will start the voting on the first poll question. So first we want to know, how much automation do you currently use as part of your security strategy? Is that A, a great deal, B, a reasonable amount, C, a small amount, D, a very small amount, or E, none? I'm going to open the voting on that one now. So please do vote on that, and keen to get your thoughts on that, and we will bring up those results a bit later. But now, delighted to hand over to our first speaker today, Matt Hardy. So Matt, over to you.
Good morning, so good afternoon. How is everyone? Thank you very much, Michael. So basically I'm going to talk about, I suppose, me as a CISO and the challenges I face within an organisation. Things I would like to, and it's quite interesting. I had my first interaction with automation back in the early 2000s, and I was brought into an organisation that just invested in some new intrusion prevention systems, and in with them, basically what happened, they turned on it all, configured it, and they wanted an email from every single alert, and consequently the email server fell over. So I was brought in to go and fix that, and actually looking at it, what do I want to achieve out of automation? And one of the key things is, I want a machine to do it for me. I don't want to know it's done it. I just want to see the end result. So I just flick forward, and one of the reasons I use that analogy is that I don't know if anyone's seen The Imitation Game, where Alan Turing trying to break the and here's a good statement. His problem is you need using men to try and beat a machine. To beat a machine. And once we talk about machines, and when we're talking about all the technology we use, the only way we are going to be able to investigate and detect in a timely fashion is to use a machine. And that's really where I'm going with that analogy. As a CISO, the current challenges, and as I see, is that budget. We're always pressurised. I've only got, as any given role, a finite budget. I don't have an infinite pot. I have to make do with the budget I have to try and deliver the biggest bang for buck I can. And again, with that, I've got to invest in people, processes, and technology. The other challenge you have in running a security organisation is the attack surfaces and vectors are changing and expanding. I work within the telecommunication industry, so cast back 20 years ago when I was running an ISP, there wasn't anything such as Internet of Things, smartphones. I mean, I actually remember the day when I could actually just make a phone call with the phone. Today, they are a mini computer. And so, the more these devices, they're more open to attacks. And again, the bigger the threat surface, the more events, the more tools we need to look at it. And of course, the biggest challenge, I think, at the moment, and we'll probably all agree, is the talent gap. How do we get and retain the skills to look after our estates? So I would actually take that as the first one, our talent gap. They're predicting millions of jobs unfilled. So one of the things, I think this is where probably artificial intelligence and automation can help. And I'll cover this in a second. The budget challenges. Most cases, the security budget is part of the IT budget. I don't think it should. However, we have to spend a percentage of our IT budget on security. And again, one of the challenges you always have when communicating with the finance people is, what have I got for my money? I used to have a standing joke with the previous organisation, the finance director said, the more money you give me, the less bad things are going to happen. Because really, this is what it's about, with the money to investing the money in the right places. And ultimately, this is one of the challenges. We have to do more with less. Again, coming back to the attack surface, you've only got to look at something like the MITRE's attack framework of seeing all those attack vectors. That's this year. Next year, it could be more. It's getting bigger and bigger. As technology advances, there's more and more ways of subverting and attacking the system. I mean, coming back, we've got now, taking away the on-premise stuff. We all know and understand the threat vectors that a web server on-premise or an email server. But as soon as you start bringing the cloud into play, there's the mobile, bring your own device challenges, the Internet of Things challenges, the DevOps containers, web applications. The list is just keeping growing and growing. And again, as the attack surface gets bigger, we need more and more tools. More and more tools to look at what's going on. We're seeing more and more events. I mean, I worked in quite a large organisation a number of years ago. We was getting 2.5 million events a day. It is, it's overload. And again, coming back to here, it was like the average enterprise generates 10,000 security events a day. And again, coming back to what I talked about, the imitation game, you need a machine to beat a machine. Getting a person to look at all these events is never going to happen. There's never going to be enough hours in a day, or you just keep putting more people at it. And again, this is setting up the scene for probably obviously the closing piece, which is about automation. Certainly, I have a vested interest in automating anything I can. Taking a standard phishing attack, how can I automate that? I want to automate that. I don't want to be chasing around trying to clean up people's mailboxes. I want that to be done automatically. Do I get an analyst in to do the work? And I have a choice. Do I get 3 or 4 analysts in at significant cost, or do I start putting automation in because they're on call 24 hours a day? And there's certain stuff that we can do quite easily. We can automate patching. We can automate malware detection. Most common antivirus have this capability. And the thing I look at is like the security ecosystem. I build systems that work with each other. They complement each other and integrate with each other. So that is, I suppose, why we need it. It's quite simple. It's going to save money. It's faster to detect. And basically, we haven't got the skills around that we can pull in to do it manually anymore. Thank you very much. I think it was at 10 minutes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. Really great introduction to the topic there. Some really great points made. And Yeah, if you have any questions at all, anything relating to anything that Matt's mentioned there, please feel free to submit any questions that you have into the question section, and we'll do our best to answer those for you. Moving on then, I'm going to bring up the results of that first poll question that we pushed live at the start of the session. So I'm going to close the voting on that one now. So we asked you, how much automation do you currently use as part of your security strategies? Top answer, 38%, was a reasonable amount. Second top answer, 32%, was a small amount. 16%, a very small amount. Only 6% said a great deal, and only 6% said none as well. So some interesting findings on there, and we may touch on those a bit later in the session. But just moving on, I will start the voting on the second poll question now. So we want to know next, what is the greatest benefit of automation to your organisation? Is that A, streamlined processes? Is that B, fewer human errors? Is that C, improved knowledge sharing? D, faster decision making? Or C, E, other? Sorry. So I'm going to start the voting on that one now, so please do vote on that. And if your answer is other, do feel free to use the question section to submit and let us know what your other is. Be very keen to hear your thoughts. Yeah, please do let us know what you think. Okay, moving on then. Delighted now to hand over to our second speaker today, Rahim Jina. So Rahim, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So yeah, quite a long title, how automation could buy peace of mind for security teams and business executives alike. I suppose the slant I'll be coming from is probably going to be from the vulnerability management point of view of the world, as that's sort of the space that I'm engrossed in daily. So there's going to be a vulnerability management slant to the content. Just a quick side of myself. My name is Rahim Jina. I'm the COO and co-founder of EdgeScan. EdgeScan is it's a vulnerability management platform, you probably guess, and looking at full stack SaaS type stuff. So yeah, live and breathe vulnerabilities daily, fortunately or unfortunately. So we're talking about automation, and I mean we know that everyone has a big problem, from largest enterprises to even mid-sized and smaller organizations. Trying to deal with security as a whole, problems just seem to be getting worse, etc., etc. We don't need to dwell on that. And we are really trying to do a lot with little, and we're trying to do more with the same. So embracing automation really is where it's sort of natural progression, really, or else we won't be able to keep up with just the pace of attacks and with the way we develop and deploy systems, which everything is just changing as the nature is of IT in general. Matt already touched on the lack of security resources that are out there and predicted to continue that way, and obviously that means that there's going to be a lack of expertise. So and I mean every organization now nearly globally will have some kind of IT presence on the web. You just can't get away with it these days. And when we think about how we developed systems, we've moved from traditional models such as waterfall, where things are nicely documented, etc., to the fast-moving world of agile. So for better or for worse, that's where we are. So obviously we've the situation now where systems, code, everything changes all the time. Every time we change a system, we introduce risk, we change in code, maybe there's a vulnerability there, etc. And how do we respond? How we react to protect our systems in a meaningful way to be able to keep up with this change. So I suppose crucial for any meaningful success today in improving our security posture is being able to do more with less. And I think a lot of organizations, enterprise and smaller, they really do struggle to know even where their systems are and what systems they even have. And obviously, if you don't know what systems you have and where they are, you don't know where your exposures are, and you don't even know what you need to protect. And I think if you were to ask anyone truthfully, do you know where all of your organization's IT systems or assets are currently? I'd be curious to see what the answer to that would be, and if anyone answered yes, I'd be curious to ask them to bet their bonus on it and see if they would stick with the yes on that. And really, there is too much to do. So obviously, we need to utilize tools to try to bridge the gap with this stuff. So while we're talking about, automation and, use of tools and trying to do a lot, the two things that we really are critically important factors that have to be working in order to do this is accuracy and scalability. So, I mean, there's no point in doing, large-scale automation if we're going to fail to maintain accuracy. Simply, if we can't make as well, so if we get the accuracy piece there, but if we can't scale it, and scale, means both size and frequency. So, if we can't take our solution, utilizing automation, etc., if we're going to fail at accuracy and if we're not going to be able to scale it to manage our entire IT estate so there's no gaps, or even as well from a frequency standpoint, to meet the needs of agile development, if code and systems are changing daily, how are we, are we keeping up with that level of change? Then the questions are, will our solution, what we tie together, will it stand up? So a little, just a quick piece on AI. Now, I suppose I apologize in advance if there's a slight negative sarcasm, even tones to a lot of this stuff. I suppose, true AI really is still in its infancy. It's not really, I suppose, a lot of you hear AI being mentioned as a core part of many solutions these days. And I think, a lot of it really is the distinction there where, we're using machine learning. And machine learning really is only as good as the data sets that are used. You have the Geiger there, garbage in, garbage out. Lots of AI solutions out there are they're glorified ML sort of solutions, and it really is, it comes down to the data sets. There's tons of articles and news, even recently, for example, Amazon had, there was gender bias and ethnic bias for their face recognition system built in just purely from the data sets that were used to train the system. Google had an example there with voice recognition as well, and there's tons of examples. You just need to do a quick Google search to find it all. And I think, in general, there seems to be a little bit of fear around AI as well in the public domain. But I think from a security person standpoint, robots and artificial intelligence, it isn't in a position that it's going to start stealing our jobs just yet. This stuff really doesn't work well at the moment anyway. And we're talking about automation. We're not necessarily talking about AI, but, we're talking about leveraging, I suppose, the tools and stuff that we have, to maintain, accuracy, scalability, to be able to successfully, I suppose, take charge of our security. And this stuff can be done well with automation. If we think about like a factory, and obviously, it's a sort of a natural progression that humans have. We invent and use tools to do things better than than we had been doing before with no tool, and grow that way. So I just with AI, I would say buyer be aware with a lot of the systems we have out there. So, and where does that leave us then? Well, I think very much at the moment we need to sort of embrace the idea that where we use the hybrid approach, where we are still, I suppose, using humans correctly, and automating what we can. So we know figure out where we leverage automation to the best way, and then where we need to let humans be involved to do the rest. And then, knowing where to do automation and where to do human, I suppose, is key to getting all of this stuff sort of working well and stuff like that. So part of this then, I suppose, meeting the needs of agile development, etc., your security response via tool chaining, to use all the terms, the latest buzzwords from, the secure DevOps world, SecDevOps or DevSecOps, whichever way, whatever your persuasion. Trying to automate as much of this stuff as possible, is where you're going to start finding some successful outcomes. and also realizing what touch points in this chain you need to get people to be involved in. Figuring that stuff out is where you're probably going to get the most success out of this stuff, and being able to leverage the people that you have in the best way. And I think that people are sort of, it's a cool challenge to try and meet, and when you get a system working well, it works really well. This slide I stole from, I borrowed, I should say, from Sans. It's actually great. The URL's there. You should check it out. It's pretty cool. So to just go into that a little bit further, I suppose we're talking about integration and orchestration. I mean, orchestration is where it's at the moment, to try and get all of these different tenets of security working with each other. And there's so many right now, and I probably missed a few there as well. But, if we're thinking about all the different things that we need to do and be aware of and have, and, in a medium or large organization, that there's so much stuff. Leveraging automation in this way, integrating all these systems. I mean, any decent vendor for any of these categories of security will have APIs and stuff to integrate with. And, you can actually automate a pretty cool system by hooking all of these things up to each other. So we start with, the developers, continuous integration, they're writing code, the code gets checked in, the code kicks off a fast tool, the fast tool may or may not, find vulnerabilities. Some vulnerabilities that, in different tools they're pretty much clear cut, with a high degree of confidence if they're going to be, if they're really going to be real or not. So maybe you might make an automatic decision there to say, yes, there's a vulnerability, kick off another set of in the chain. Or maybe you say, you know what, I'm not sure about this vulnerability, I need a person to review this output. That's where you get, people involved, security people, that are an analyst, that are reviewing it. Great, it kicks off back into the chain. Maybe the code then starts to be, there'll be a dependency management check if you're using third-party libraries. That might automatically kick off into, continuous deployments, where configuration management is then leveraged. The environments are built automatically and pushed out to your production environment. That might then kick off vulnerability management, just to make sure that we're not deploying stuff with any kind of known vulnerabilities, etc. Again, if something is found there, it may or may not need a person to be involved. We need to realize and know where the best place for humans to be involved is. Then we're kicking that back. Maybe a vulnerability is found. What do we do? Right. Well, then we can raise a ticket in our GRC risk and compliance system automatically. We might be able to integrate with a WAF to block the particular type of vulnerability. Might be able to do that automatically. Then we might, integrate with a SIEM or a SIM, just so that the SOC guys in our organization are aware of what's going on. Trigger some events. We might start sending SMS messages to people, etc. All of this stuff is really beautiful when it all works together. The caveat there is the false positives in this type of system is where things start to break down. If we're starting to introduce large amounts of false positives into a system like this, that's when people, if it comes to waking people up in the middle of the night because they have a critical vulnerability, etc., which turns out to not be real, that's when, this stuff starts to get turned off. But so stepping stones is a good way to progress into a larger set of this stuff, focusing on small subsets to begin with, get them working, and then start hooking them up to the rest of the infrastructure and stuff is a good approach. So I suppose to wrap up, knowing where to leverage automation is key, but knowing as well, likewise, where to leverage people in this whole chain is just as important. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Michael.
Fantastic, thanks for him. Really great presentation there, and no doubt we'll touch on a few of those points in a bit more detail a bit later on in the session. Again, if you've got any questions at all relating to anything that Raheem said there, do feel free to submit them, and we'll do our best to take a look at those a bit later. I'm going to bring up the results of the second poll question now quickly. So I'm just going to close the voting down on that one. So we asked, what is the greatest benefit of automation for your organisation? The top answer, 41%, was streamlined processes, followed by 33%, which was fewer human errors. 16% was the third top answer, which was faster decision making. Just 2% went for improved knowledge sharing. 5% went for other. So just before I hand over to our third speaker then, I will open the voting on the third and final poll question. So we want to know next, do you plan to implement more autonomous technology or approaches in your security strategies in the next 12 months? Is that A, yes, B, no, or C, unsure? I'm going to open the voting on that one now, so please do vote on that question as well. But moving on, delighted now to hand over to our third speaker, Max Heinemeyer. So Max, over to you.
Thanks very much, Michael, and good day, ladies and gentlemen. And just wow, the amount of insights I gained already myself from Raheem and Matt are just amazing. So thank you very much, gents, for these insights. And just a recap for me, so we heard from Matt about the CISO perspective, some recent challenges, not enough budget, not enough skill in the to go. And Raheem showed us a bit more concrete and from a vulnerability management perspective, how this could look like, and the stepping stones there, and also a little anecdote about supervised machine learning. I want to take it a step further, and I don't know, dear audience, if any of you is watching the GartnerSec conference, which is taking place right now, but it's the security conference hosted by Gartner, and I'm just mentioning it because the main keynote on the first day was about automation. And I couldn't work in the slide here because I had submitted my slides before this took place, but there's a brilliant slide on this keynote which shows us a continuum of automation for cybersecurity. Where on the left we have playbooks, so in the low maturity area, playbooks and automating certain things like firewall rules, patching. And on the very right-hand side, and this is Gartner's terminology here, is AI-enabled automation and autonomous response. And I've got a funky title, Director of Threat Hunting. It means I head up a team of 30 analysts here at Darktrace. We at Darktrace do security monitoring and use AI and machine learning solutions for that. And I've been in a very lucky position to have been involved in most of our strategic and big clients. And having over 3,000 clients now, I've seen probably over 900 of them myself, their different networks, and done threat hunts in these networks. So still very much hands-on, and I've used machine learning solutions to do so. And I've gained, I think, quite a lot of interesting insights from that, a few of them which I want to share with you. So I'm still very much hands-on, and I used to be a pen tester, a red team lead, and I used to sit in a SOC. I used to work with old-school SIM solutions in SOCs and be a SOC operator, so still very, very much hands-on. And what I want to talk about really is beyond automation, autonomous response. And again, we at Darktrace, we use this terminology a lot. We've been using it for the last 4 years, but Gartner's just coined this as well. So it's not just us saying this, but autonomous response is the next big step. And I think we've always been fighting against our own complexity in cybersecurity, right? It's so complicated, so many alerts. If you've ever looked at a SOC and all these security alerts, you have to triage them or automate them, and you have to have the understanding, the skills to go through. You have to have the tool knowledge. You have to have a security engineering team to keep your tools tuned. So in a SIM, this could be the use cases. In an EDR solution, so an endpoint detection response solution, this would have to be the tuning of your detections. If you run a vulnerability management solution, you have to know what to scan, where to scan, how to tailor your scans, do authenticated scans, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of incremental work to be done and a lot of complexity to beat. And like Raheem said, it's really tough to know what you have in your estate, especially in today's age with the Internet of Things, the cloud, industrial environments, supply chains, and all these things. So what I want to talk about is beyond automation, right? When we think about automation, and I think this is what I took away from Matt, more very well understood workflows. And I want to talk about the next step, which sometimes scares people, not just automating the detection of sometimes unknown unknowns, but going further and letting the machines do the heavy lifting and also doing containment and very surgical responses to unknown threats. And I didn't buy this. I don't like all the big buzzwords and everybody crying wolf and saying AI and the terminology used there. So let me try to cut through these buzzwords and show you what I actually mean by this. And what I mean by this is, Raheem said, be careful when people talk about AI. Now, I also, besides my work at Darktrace, I worked with a German think tank that advises on AI solutions and machine learning on cybersecurity. And what I think is really important to understand, and I don't want to lecture anybody or talk too much about just AI in general, but there's many different forms of so-called narrow AI. So artificial intelligence that's really good at specific tasks. Narrow as in computer vision. So, for example, algorithms to automatically detect human beings or road signs, often used in autonomous cars, or pattern recognition and voice recognition used in Alexa, Amazon Alexa, and things like that. So narrow in the sense of that it's really good to accomplish certain things. And most of these things are using supervised machine learning, and that means you have to feed your AI, your machine learning, a training data set. And exactly like Raheem said, if garbage goes in, garbage goes out. So if the training data is bad or poisoned, or an attacker gets hold of the data set, the training data, they can attack it. Now, what I talk about here is not supervised machine learning. So there's no training data sets. Everything I talk about here is based on unsupervised machine learning. And I don't want to sound nitpicky, but that's quite a big difference, especially because unsupervised machine learning uses algorithms to detect clusters, to detect normal behavior, to detect similar behavior, to detect which computers act similarly, which kind of network streams look similar, what's out of the norm. Is this a computer that behaves weird, makes maybe connections that never happened before? Why is this computer using RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, to connect to this other computer in the industrial control network when none of their peers do it? So I just gave a few examples, but this is what I really mean. When we think about autonomous response, at least we at Darktrace, we use AI to do so. And when I say AI, I mean a lot of stacked unsupervised machine learning algorithms. And very important to understand here is that it keeps learning, and the AI builds an understanding of self and what is normal. So if any AI solution, really, any solution that uses proper unsupervised machine learning would be seeing my laptop, which I'm running this presentation from right now, it would start to learn that my laptop is doing certain things every day, using VPN solutions at certain times of the day, sending out more data in the afternoon because I do a lot of web access and video conferencing, that I use LDAP internally, LDAP-S internally, HTTPS, HTTP requests, all kinds of HTTP requests, and it starts to cluster my computer with other computers to get an understanding and continuously evolve this understanding. So this is really important. It's not just a baseline, but what I'm explaining makes sense, I think, if we think further. So if there's an understanding of normal and self based on network data, for example, we can detect all kinds of threats, really, right? I want to talk about the threat landscape just in a second, and I appreciate we're all cybersecurity experts here, but maybe it gives you a different spin on your perspective if you see Darktrace's perspective on this. But the interesting thing is, if you don't predefine what a threat looks like, if you don't say a threat is a brute force attack where we have to see more than 50 login failures in 5 minutes, if you do not have to define this, but if you can only say an unusual amount of failed logins, right? You get rid of the high threshold and you say unusual for this device, the peer group, the overall network. Then you gain a lot of freedom and a lot of power because you can do much better detections. And you're not tied down to the signature and rule level, but you can actually elevate yourself to the behavioral level. Really nifty that MITRE and the MITRE attack framework came around, because this is exactly what I talk about. We do not just want to look at the signature level, but actually at behavior. So we can detect all kinds of cyber threats when we start looking at normal behavior and anomalies, and not just at predefined bad behavior. And the important bit here is as well that this can be done on any kind of data, really. So it could be either in the cloud, in software as a service environments, in the enterprise, in industrial environments. And I think that's quite important because most of the attacks we're seeing happen through the supply chain, either physical or virtual supply chain. Cleaner, a very, very popular Windows speed up my machine software, which had been compromised in 2017, or by compromising software service accounts like in Office 365, for example. So just, stick to our old school approach. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's why I'm saying we have to just steps and think big. Just going by our old school approach of trying to protect the internal network and the perimeter is not going to be enough, because companies these days look very different than 5 years ago. And this is the bold step, not just detecting unknown unknowns by using some AI solution, but also fighting back. And acting upon it so your human team gains time and can focus on tactical issues, not just strategic issues. And let's dive into a few of these points, shall we? I think it's quite interesting to see how we perceive the threat landscape, and it's constantly changing. I don't know if you noticed, but the price of Bitcoin is rising again. In 2017, we've seen loads of crypto miners where computers get affected, and they don't get infected by just banking malware, but they got infected by crypto miners. So running Bitcoin or Monero miners on devices, and we anticipate a new rise in that because the price of Bitcoin is rising in the last few weeks. And there's also ransomware. Just yesterday, we ran a proof value with a customer in Colombia, government agency, and they got hit by a novel strain of ransomware, which we saw and completely detected. And we hadn't seen that before. There were no signatures for it, but on the behavioral level, it was clearly an anomaly, just very, very easy to spot because it used SMB1 to move around, which is unusual for most environments these days. It did RDP scans in the internal network. It did beaconing connections out of the internet to destinations nobody ever went to before. So what I'm trying to say is the threat landscape is changing very rapidly, and the bad guys go where the money goes. And it's not just, the old school hacker in the basement or nation-state attackers. The barriers to entry, and I won't dwell on this too long because we're all cybersecurity pros, but the barrier to entry to get into malicious hacking, black hat stuff, is incredibly low these days because there's many very strong open source tools which can be used, and all the knowledge to get started in hacking is just out there. And it's become a real geopolitical issue. But what we also see is that there's more threat automation. So I try to give this a different spin on what we talk about, right? We talk about automation here for blue teams, for defenders, for the good guys. But actually the bad guys use automation where they can because they're mainly driven by return on invest, right? If they can reuse an attack, they're going to do it. If they can automate some parts of their kill chain, of their attack chain, they're going to do it because it means more attacks, more ransom, more data exfiltration in less time, which is always profitable. So we see a lot of attacks that are not just staying under the radar. We still see those by nation-state attackers, but that are not just staying under the radar, but they're smash and grab these days. Sometimes, and especially in the last 18 months, I'd say, we've seen more and more worming attacks. It doesn't have to be the big destructive WannaCry or NotPetya worms, but we've seen a lot of Eternal Blue, the big NSA exploit being abused, or other forms of flat removal being abused by attackers, where one computer gets infected, especially via spam phishing these days, and within 10-15 minutes, the infection spreads to 400 or 500 computers in the same network because it's abusing weak administrative credentials, an exploit that's been available, or something like that. And I think this is particularly relevant at the moment because we have this dangling Damocles sword over us of CVE 2019-07-08, also labeled Blue Keep. So an RDP vulnerability, which is very, very severe. There's no public exploits for it yet, but it has big worming potential. So there's a lot of threats out there, and a lot of actors automate their attacks. They just do automated scanning. If they infect a computer, they check the operating system. They download specifically tailored malware. They see in which part of the world they infected the victims to download ransomware nodes in the adequate language. So there's more and more automation on the bad guys side of things, so why shouldn't we use it? And of course, the cybersecurity resource shortage, mainly called the talent shortage, which I don't need to go into detail again. And I've mentioned autonomous response before. So why should we be so bold and talk about automation and also autonomously respond to threats? Well, we've seen that some attacks are just fast moving. Some data exfiltration attacks, they just take hours, like literally get in, find a vulnerability or spam phishing, use tools like Bloodhound to move around or Eternal Blue, dump credentials on the main controller, and within a day or two, they get out of the environment and have their bounty. So attacks get faster, and in many cases, the response from the blue teams, from the defenders, is just too slow, even if we see it. Especially when there's a worming attack going on, like worming banking Trojans somewhere. Even if you see it as it happens, it's often too late to do anything about it. And this is the most exciting part, this bullet point. And I don't want to bore you with these things and dwell too long on machine learning, but how can we dare to try to autonomously respond to threats which you might have never seen before? So let's say there's a new kind of banking Trojan hitting a device via spam phishing, and how could we achieve reacting to it in time before it spreads around, kill its command control traffic, and make sure that user, that computer, is not interrupted in its business operation. Because let's face it, it's the elephant in the room. We cut back on autonomous response, or nobody's running, or almost nobody's running their IPS systems in live mode, intrusion prevention systems, because we all have horror scenarios in our heads where the autonomous response or the IPS just destroys the business, right? An important computer is isolated, or a firewall shuts down, or a VIP device can't browse the internet, and nobody's doing that these days. Now, let's think back about what I said in the beginning of my presentation. When we have a solution that can understand normal, for example, by using unsupervised machine learning, and that knows that Max's computer does certain things every day, goes to SharePoint, uses email, goes to certain websites, looks at YouTube tutorials, and I got hit by a banking Trojan. Now, what does that look like? The Trojan downloads a payload from some compromised website that nobody ever goes to in my environment. Then it starts beaconing over command and control channels to other compromised websites or IP addresses that nobody goes to. Then it starts to scan the internal network for maybe something to hold to ransom or spread laterally, and so on and so forth. So there's many things which I never do, I as Max the user. So the attack deviates from the normal pattern of life. And that means if we just enforce the known good pattern of life when there's a threat happening, we're not going to interrupt the business, but we can contain the threat. So what would happen, and I've seen this just yesterday again in one of our customers here, who's using, happens to use our autonomous response technology, is that when something like a banking Trojan hits and there's no signature for it, it's a new strain of malware, or maybe a crypto miner that has never seen before, the autonomous response would enforce normal behavior because it has learned via unsupervised machine learning what the devices normally do, what the pattern of life is, what the group of devices normally does. So it kills the second stage payload, for example, because nobody ever downloads executable files from these weird, rare websites. It kills the command and control traffic because no other devices use these weird beaconing patterns and send unusual amounts of data to IP addresses on the internet. And nobody ever from this group of devices, like my computer, would scan the internal network because I'm not an admin. So these things I just mentioned, the beaconing, the command and control traffic, the download of further payloads, would be interrupted, for example, by integrating with network access controls, or by sending TCP resets on the network, or killing processes. So that will be interrupted, but, and this is the most important point, the rest of the operations, the normal behavior, can still continue. So if I get hit Max as the user, I can still go to my SharePoint, I can still get to my email, to my certain intranet websites, but all the bad behavior in the background that would infect my computer and lead to a big compromise gets contained because the pattern of life is enforced. Group pattern of life, or whatever, so the security team can catch up. And this is what it's all about. It's not about containing a threat forever, but giving your team the time to get hold of the incident, get onto it, and then react to it. And I was extremely skeptical because I'm a technically minded person. I run still my own red teams and pen tests, and I know my way around security operations. And I've seen IPSs kill businesses in the past, but this actually works, and this is why I'm so enthusiastic about it. And it doesn't really matter where it sits, right? This could be in the cloud, where when you see unusual activity in your Office 365, maybe automatically a second factor authentication gets enabled. This could be in your emails, where certain links get stripped. It could be in your industrial control systems, which you always want to be careful about. It could be in your enterprise, your data center. It doesn't matter. The concept of these autonomous responses based on normal behavior versus anomalies can easily be transferred to any part of the modern enterprise. And I think I made it quite clear where the difference is between machine learning and traditional approaches, because the AI, the narrow artificial intelligence, and the machine learning understands normal and has an evolving understanding of that. And it's not a binary solution like old school IPSs, where a device that might have hit on a specific malware signature gets fully isolated and you've got an angry end user shouting down your neck because it was false positive, but it's enforcing normal behavior. And it can do this on an increasing escalation level. So maybe when it's a subtle threat and not many indicators, settle the group pattern of life. So the same device, be it a server or a CCTV camera that often gets compromised, or a laptop, or maybe a PLC, a programmable logic controller in an ICS or SCADA environment gets compromised, but it's a very subtle thing, then maybe just the group pattern of life gets enforced. So the device can only keep doing what its group does normally. So it still can do a lot of things. Now, if the malicious activity continues, it gets reduced, put in a much tighter box, of its own behavior, its own pattern of life. So it can only do what it did in the past it normally does. And if it gets worse and the threat continues, it can continue to escalate to, for example, block all outgoing connections or something like that. So it's not just a binary solution. I think that's very important to understand. And this ensures that the business flow is not interrupted, the normal business flow. And I've got one quick example with me, which I want to talk through. We've seen this a few weeks ago. One of our customers, US government, point of entry was email, and the objective was get a spare phishing email through. And the attackers got hold of the company's, of the organization's email address book, so they know every single email address in the company, and they started sending tailored phishing emails from A to Z in that company, like in a brute force from A to Z, just to every single recipient in that company. And our solution happened to see that on email and in the networks. The email was weaponized with a spare phishing link. And just, I think yesterday or today, there were a few 0 days dropped for Firefox. So it's always interesting to see these kind of browser-based attacks. And we've seen these phishing links. And the interesting thing is we didn't use a static signature or blacklisted IP or domain to catch this, but those were new recipients and new senders. So we had never seen this kind of email behavior before, right? One sender sending a lot of emails from A to Z in order to all the recipients in this environment. Also, the style and the sentiment of the actual emails were not in line with the normal communication patterns of these emails. And the last bit is we also saw the network traffic, and the link in those emails pointed to a 100% rare domain on the internet. That means nobody in this city's environment, in this government's environment, ever went to this rare domain. And all of these subtle behavioral anomalies led to this being detected straight away, and the links were stripped, so no damage done. But I found this incredibly interesting because I used to work in the SOC and know how difficult it is to get hold of spare phishing or whaling attacks. And seeing this without the use of any signatures or blacklists, just based on the behavior, and also autonomously responding to it. So blocking that domain once it was confirmed to be a threat autonomously, and stripping the links from the emails autonomously, that was, for me, just incredible because it bought so much time. And the last thing I want to talk about is how people can build trust in, and we call it AI here again, in these autonomous response systems. Because a lot of you, and so was I a few years ago, would still be skeptical to run such an autonomous response system in your environment of the fear of interrupting business operations. So the important bit for us is, and that was a learning process, that you cannot just give organizations this solution and activate it and make it block everything everywhere. It's very surgical, and the important bit is that you start, and we start normally with what we call the human confirmation mode. So if we want to build trust, and be it in Darktrace or any other automation solution, if we want to build trust in autonomous response, we put it in human confirmation mode first. So we say, okay, what's your risk profile? What should we cover? Maybe we start with your user base first. Don't go into your SCADA and ICS environment because something fails there. It's going to be very, very painful. So let's build trust together. So we show you, the AI solution shows you the actions it would take, but it doesn't take them for, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks. So you can see what the actions would be: enforce a pattern of life, isolate a device, and so on and so forth. And after 1 or 2 weeks, when the users and the operators have seen, okay, it's quite reasonable, it doesn't kill my business even if it would have acted, we activate what we call the human confirmation mode. So that gives the operators, the security operators, the option when an action would be taken to confirm this action. So it's still in passive mode, but you as the operator get a prompt saying, would you like to take this action? We do exactly this, this, and this. Would you like to do this? And we found out that usability in these things is incredibly important. So we worked on a mobile app, and users can even, when they're on the train or just during lunch, because the text happens so fast, you sometimes have to react once you see it. Just see it on your mobile app, on your mobile device, and just take action if you want to. So first, passive mode, see what the solution would do, then build trust, human confirmation mode. For certain areas, maybe your data center not, that's the passive mode to show you what would happen. But for other areas of the business, maybe your guest Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi in your main office, we take human confirmation mode. And then once the trust is built to a certain degree, we put it into active mode, so it's actually acting autonomously within seconds. And I've seen this work in many cases. Spare phishing email comes in. Latest case I've seen is in one hospital here in the UK, where one device in this hospital, who's got our autonomous response solution, got hit by a spare phishing. The payload got downloaded. It was a trickbot malware. Didn't have a signature at that time, and all the indicators of compromise were unknown at the point because it was a completely novel strain. And instead of spreading around, it got instantly contained by the means I mentioned before, stopping second-stage payloads, killing command and control traffic, blocking internal scanning and lateral movement. And the user who clicked on the link in this hospital didn't even notice they were being contained because they can't continue their normal business operations. So we had the active mode there for the user base, and it paid manifold because they didn't get hit by a worming strain of malware. Really quite interesting. Now, as you can tell, I'm quite enthusiastic about this. I think we're closing in a few minutes. I would hand it back to Michael. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody, so far, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Max. Really great. About 10 minutes left, so we are coming up to the hour, but we have got a few minutes to tackle a few of the questions that we've had come in. I'm also keen to get a couple of thoughts from the panel regarding some of the poll results that we've had, but I'll just bring up the results of the third poll question first. So we asked, do you plan to implement more 12 months? 68% said yes, just 8% said no, 22% were unsure. Matt, if you're still there with us, let's look to bring you in here quickly. Our first poll question was, how much automation do you currently use as part of your security strategies? 38% was the top answer, which was a reasonable amount. The next top answer, 32%, was a small amount. So you're looking at about 70% swing there, either a reasonable amount or a small amount. Just in your opinion, do you think enough companies effectively use enough automation at the moment, or do you think that companies need to be using more?
I'm actually going to spin this a little bit. I think some companies have to look at what the current tooling has got, and is it capable of automation? Because I've been going around where I am and switching stuff on, turning it on, and going, oh, I didn't know they had that feature there, and I've actually found that some of our tooling has got automation. So I think maybe it's, they're looking for this. So basically, I think, with this high percentage, I would expect, maybe a little bit higher if they started looking at the tooling and saying, actually, have we got that capability right now? Could we leverage that? That would be my view.
Sure, okay. Yeah, great point, Matt. And we've had a question come in from one of our listeners. So, Rahim, maybe we'll come to you for this one. One of our viewers wants to know, are WSUS servers or WSUS servers still used, and how would SSCM be effective over WSUS or WSUS? Any thoughts on that one?
Hi. Yeah, I saw that one there. Not hugely, to be honest. I mean, I'm assuming the question is, are the Windows Update server system still used? And then I think I assume they meant SCCM, which is a Windows Configuration Management sort of platform. I don't have first-hand experience of. I know a lot of organizations use Windows Update servers internally still, just to manage and distribute patches, etc. But I mean, I wouldn't be able to give it an effective comment if one is better than the other.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I could jump in there. This is Max from Darktrace.
Sure. Yeah.
If you don't mind. And this is just anecdotal evidence or reference, I think. I can't speak to what's more effective, but over the last 3.5 years or so, where I've seen almost 3 to 4 customer environments in all kinds of verticals every day, or almost every day, I think WSUS has declined a bit, and I've definitely seen a steep increase in SCCM, just from anecdotal evidence and my small biased data set I have here. So I'd say yes, SCCM is growing and WSUS may be shrinking a bit. And there might be good reasons for that. I still remember when a few years ago there was a big vulnerability coming out, and Rahim might remember this, where a lot of WSUS servers did the updates and patches in the middle, or attacker in the middle could just intercept that and basically with a few parameters infect the whole environment and hijack that service. So there's not only security concerns, of course, but there was a lot of misconfiguration potential. And that's the two big points I think I see at the moment from my biased data set, more SCCM than WSUS. And this big vulnerability, which I still see sometimes, which is unencrypted updates being pushed out internally over WSUS.
Fantastic, great, thanks so much. Max, while we have you, a question I've got for you, and it's something that you touched on, and the other speakers have touched on as well. It's kind of the kind of hype around machine learning and AI and automation. I guess you could almost refer to some of it as snake oil. Do you think there's too much of that, and do you think that actually makes it harder for companies to know exactly what type of automation they want and how it can be effective for their company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's very dear to my heart. And seeing the journey from, we've been around for 6 years, and it's been our party line since day one because it's what we do. We use unsupervised machine learning to detect cyber-relevant anomalies. And then everybody jumped on that bandwagon and used AI for everything, and everybody has zero trust in AI-enabled solutions. And I think there was a recent survey or research and said that only 50% of companies who claim they use AI actually use AI. And it's a bit of a bloated term because in the general media's opinion, if you say AI, people think of general AI, which is things like Terminator or systems that run out of control and just destroy things. And that's not what it is. And it's really interesting how a terminology can shape the perception because it's really a very clever set of tools, right? It's a very powerful suite of methods. And AI might be a very bloated term these days, thanks to everybody in the vendor space picking it up. But it is a set of, once you understand it, and I hope I could clarify today a little bit what at least we do in the narrow AI space, once you understand what kind of value it delivers and you cut through the marketing, you can see if it fits your organization and where it can help you. And I think that's incredibly important because if we don't call it AI, but just another boring technical term like object-oriented programming, nobody asks if object-oriented programming is going to be the next breakthrough in, software engineering because it's old. But if it had a fancier term, I'm sure people will pick it up more and make a big deal out of it. But sorry to ramble on, but to come back to your question, I think there's a lot of snake oil out there. And the best thing I can say is if you think about some AI-based solution, just try it out. See what kind of value it delivers, if it delivers immediate results, and ask your vendor, do you use this stuff internally yourself? Like, do you use your own solution? Because I think that's quite an important point about implementability and usability.
Sure, no, great points. And Max, maybe let's just finish off you very quickly. We've got about a minute left. The third and final poll question was, do you plan to implement more autonomous technology or approaches in your security strategy in the next 12 months? 68% said yes. I mean, do you think the next year is going to be, a really big and busy one when it comes to autonomous technology and, companies kind of bringing it more into the business?
I think so for two reasons. We saw a big uptick in autonomous response from our side after WannaCry and NotPetya in 2017, so the threat landscape forced people to do so. And now with Bitcoin on the rise again and more ransomware coming out, I'm sure that's going to be a driver. And the second factor is, really quick, is Gartner pushing it this year. So a lot of people still follow Gartner and their recommendations, and they coming out and saying this is a big thing and companies need to look at it, is going to be another driver. So I'm sure of it, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, that's pretty much all the time that we've got. So we are going to have to look to wrap things up there. So a big thank you to Max, Rahim and Max for joining us and some really great presentations and discussion. Thanks so much for your time today. And obviously a big thank you to Darktrace for their sponsorship of this webinar. For upcoming webinars that we are running, please do check out our website. Our next session will actually be taking place on the 25th of June, and we'll be looking at how to manage attacks, vulnerabilities and complexities in API. So we look forward to you joining us for that one if you can. Please remember there will be a recording of this webinar made available on our website very shortly, so you can listen back to the session anytime you want. Please do also remember that you can rate the session, you can tell us what you liked, and you can let us know if there's anything that you'd like to hear from us in the future. But without further ado, I'll say a big thank you to you all for joining us, and we will end the session there.